Today we're going to talk about percent of change. So by the end of the class, we will find and apply percent of change. So you will, or I will, be able to find percent of change and apply that to sale price. So let's do a little bit of review real quick. So let's review percent. What is the percent proportion? Well, if you remember correctly, the percent proportion is percent over 100 is equal to part over whole, where there's three unknowns that we're looking for. One is the percent, the easiest one to find because it has a percent sign on it. And then there's a part and a whole relationship. And sometimes the part is represented by the word is, and sometimes the whole is represented by the word of. And that only works if you get it in the form of the percent question. So let's have a lesson today over percent of change. This is a PowerPoint, so just kind of bear with me on this one. Get my pen up here. Okay, so first part of this, the warm-up, we're not going to do, but I do want to talk about a couple questions on this one. Okay, so these are 4 questions that are written in the percent question format. And if you can get a question written in this format, your is always represents the part, and the of represents the total. Okay, so just kind of remember that. So let's run through these real fast. We also had a problem of the day. This is kind of an interesting question. However, we're not going to work on this one right now. So now let's work on finding percent of increase and decrease. This will be the last lesson we do on percent. We will have 3 vocabulary words that we will work on here. Percent of change, and then there's 2 types of change you can have, either an increase or a decrease. Percents can be used to describe a change. Percent change is the ratio of the amount of change to the original amount. So since it's talking about a ratio, that means that we are going to be using a fraction. And this is our percent change formula. Now we're going to add one thing to this formula. Doesn't show that within the PowerPoint, but it does refer to it. It does talk about it, and I will show you that when we get to some questions. So percent of change is just the amount of change divided by the original amount. And then what we're going to do with this, because when you do this answer, you're going to get a decimal. So what I would like for you to do is multiply by 100. And that will then convert your answer into a percentage. So it will be a percent of change. Now, like I said, there are 2 types of percent of change that you can have. One is called percent of increase. Percent increase describes how much the original amount increases or goes up. Percent decrease describes how much the original amount decreases or goes down. So let's see if we can work a problem. This one says, find the percent of increase or decrease from 16 to 12. Well, the first thing you need to decide, is this a percent of increase or percent of decrease? Well, if I'm going from 16 to 12, we know that it has to be a decrease. Now our proportion is, or the problem that we're looking for, the percent of change, when we're looking at our formula here is amount of decrease divided by the original amount. So the first thing that we have to find here is what we call the percent of decrease, or the amount of change, excuse me. And the way you do that is you just take the bigger number and subtract the smaller number from it. That's all I want you to do. So you'll notice here in this first part of here, what they did was they did 16 take away 12, because we're looking for the change of 16 to 12. So we take the 16, we take the 12, we subtract those, we get a 4. This is called the amount of change. Okay, so now we write a percent problem, and it says, what percent is 4 of 16? Well, that's our ratio of amount of decrease divided by the original amount. So decrease divided by the original, so we do 4 divided by 16, and that's going to give us a decimal. And you see that the decimal that gives us is 0.25. So then we need to convert this decimal into a percentage. So that's why I said what we're going to do is we're now going to take this division problem and then multiply the answer by 100. And what will that multiplying 100 do? It just moves the decimal over 2 places to the right and adds a percent sign. So we end up with 25%. So from 16 to 12 is a 25% decrease because it is going down. So let's try another one here. It says find the percent of increase or decrease from 15 to 20. Like I said, the first thing that we do is we find the amount of change. So we do that by taking the big number and subtracting the small number from it. So what is 20 take away 15? That is correct, 5. So this is the amount of change. So now we have the percent of change ratio, which is amount of change, 5, divided by the original amount. So out of the 15 or 20, which one is the original one? Correct, the 15, because it says we're finding a percent of increase or decrease from 15 to 20. So the 15 is our first number. So this is going to be 5 over 15. Okay? So when we simplify that down, you actually end up with 1/3. You don't have to do that, but it helps you because that gives you an idea of what the decimal is going to be. Okay, so we end up with 1/3. Okay, and now we take 1 divided by 3, and then we multiply that by 100. So let's see what they did. Let me clear off this ink down here on the screen here. What they do, find the percent of increase, is first find the amount of change, 20 divided by 15. And then we are looking for what percent is 5 of 20. And this one, they actually did the wrong problem. Okay, because this should be 5 of 15, because the 15 is the original amount. So this problem here, this one is actually wrong. Okay, so this number right here should be 15, which is going to give all the rest of this stuff. It's going to make it incorrect. Right? So let's see, what did they do? They did 5 divided by 20, but what should we have done? 5 divided by 15, which actually gives us 0.33333333. We know it's going to be 0.33, so this one should be, again, a 15 here, which should give us not 0.25, but 0.3 with a bar. Okay, now if you remember this, in order to, when you multiply this by 100, it's going to give you 0.33, okay, and that decimal is going to be moved over, and we'll end up with 33.3 with a bar, right? But how do we have to write that? 33 1/3%. Now, since we were going from 15 to 20, this is a 33 1/3% increase. 33 1/3% increase. Now, hopefully, this one will actually give us the right numbers here. So it says, when Jim was exercising, his heart rate went from 70 beats per minute to 98 beats per minute. What was the percent of increase? And this one, it says they go from 70 to 98. So we know that's going to be an increase. Okay? So the first thing we have to do is find the amount of change. And the amount of change is 98 minus 70, which is 28. So then we have the percent question basically that says, what percent is 28 of 70? Because the 70 was, again, our original amount. It was the original, it was the starting value. You went from 70 to 98. So now we set up our ratio, amount of change divided by original amount. So this is 28 divided by 70. And then what are we going to do with that to change that into a percentage? We're going to multiply that by 100. That's correct. Okay. So we do the division and we end up with 0.4. So then I multiply that answer by 100, and that gives us a 40%. And when we're going from 70 to 98, that's a percent of increase. So his heart rate actually increased by 40% when he exercised. So let's try one more. Then I think we'll probably be ready to go ahead and work on our assignment. In 1999, a certain stock was worth $1.25 a share. In 2002, the same stock was worth 85 cents a share. What was the percent decrease? Well, first off, was it a decrease? Yes, because we went from $1.25 to 85. Okay, so that's actually a decrease of 40 cents. Okay. So let's find out. We need to turn that into a percentage, though, not just a numeric value or a money value. So the first thing we do is find the amount of change. So we subtract 85 from $1.25, and we get 40 cents. And what did we say we were going to do with this decimal? Multiply it by 100 to convert it to a percentage. So we multiply that by the percent, and we end up with 40 cents divided by, which is the amount of change, divided by the original amount, which was $1.25. We get 0.32. Okay, now to convert that into a percentage, I now multiply that number by 100, and we end up with 32%. So this stock actually decreased by 32% because we went from $1.25 to 85 cents a share. Okay? So in order to find, let's kind of get out of the PowerPoint here. Okay. So in order to find percent of change, what we need to remember is that to find percent of change, you're going to do the amount of change divided by the original amount. Okay, and then you're going to multiply that answer by 100. And that is how we find percent of change. Okay, so you take the two numbers, whatever the two numbers are, subtract them to find the amount of change. We divide that by whatever the original number is, and that's going to give us a decimal value. Then you multiply that decimal value by 100. Okay? Now, what I would like for you to do, now that you've watched this lesson, you've found out how to find percent of change, I want you to work on a little assignment. Okay? And this assignment's going to look like this. It's only got 9 questions on it, so you should be able to come real close to finishing this in class. Okay? So, now this one's going to be just on the computer. Right? So, actually, you can. I think I am going to give you a printed copy. I think I've already got them printed. So you can either do this on notebook paper or do this on the printed page. But what I need for you to do, okay, is you need to, on this first one here, I need you to find the amount of change. I'm going to do that by saying AOC. Okay, so the AOC, amount of change, equals. Okay, and then you're going to give me an answer. So in this particular one, you're going to do 54 minus 45, which is equal to 9. So that's the amount of change. So now we need to find the percent of change, the POC. And we know that's going to be the amount of change divided by the original amount. So if the price of a purse increased from 45 to 54, the 45 is the original amount. So you take those two numbers, you divide them, and you multiply this by 100, and that will give you a percent of change. And that's what I'd like for you to see you do on this particular assignment. Thank you.